Hello, and welcome to the Weshtern Philosophy Podcast. Two friends with oceans and oceans discussing the unseen forces in our lives through the lens of music, mystery, and crack. Today's episode begins with me noodling around on an acoustic guitar and only gets less focused from there. Enjoy.
I always love it when there is an undertone of hope, because when it's just, the world is dark, reality is dark. Oh, here you thought it might be hopeful, but that's so cliched, will make it more dark. And like I've said before, there's dark stories that need telling, but I personally find, in a weird way, it more realistic when there is an undercurrent of hope.
Are we? My new favorite chord.
Okay.
G9 sus4.
Why not? I never know if it's out of tune or if that's just a low.
It's got a wee rattle, a little fret buzz there.
Yeah, but it's also just the low that I'm hearing. Like that low string always seems to be slightly out, but it might just be that it's so low.
It's probably a tiny bit out. Yeah, goes a tiny bit sharp. Good ear, Bart.
Oh, listen. Fucking legend. That's
Okay,
what
now
I
I'm
am.
just tuning.
Is this on?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Nice. Bit of background sounds for people doing actual work.
Okay. So, special guest on today's episode is Hades, the baritone guitar.
Oh, I don't know what you just invoked there now. The god of the Greek underworld might be paying us a visit.
He might, or just Supergiant Games, which would be even better.
Oh, I can't wait for the next one, man.
I know it's in early access, but you need a Windows PC to.
Which I do have, but I really liked it on the Switch, so I'm just going to wait.
I know it was good on the Switch. It was. Bart,
Morning,
how are
buddy.
you?
Oh.
Yeah.
You asked me this 30 minutes ago, and it's just like the only thing I can do is like hold my hands up to the air like there's a huge balloon coming out of my head, and it's just like it's everything.
Mm-hmm.
So how am I? I'm feeling everything. I'm good. It's hard. It's great. It's difficult. It's everything. Yeah. So that's how I'm doing. No, it's just like, I don't know. Maybe it's the time of year. Like we've really hit actually an absolutely beautiful autumn so far. Like the last
Summer's finally here.
I've been saying that kind of since September. Like we've had loads more sun, but also like everything is still pretty green, but it's just starting to be touched by lovely orange and reds. And I do love this time of year, and I think we discussed this before, but that you before said that in Chinese medicine this is the death part of the year. And I think that probably actually goes with most pagan and more like nature connected.
It's the harvest, and it's interesting because the harvest is very joyous, but the harvest is where you cut down all the plants. Yeah, you bring them in when it's the end of the growing. Yeah, and you clear everything, and then winter is when things start to germinate under the ground, and then spring is when you start to see that growth becomes visible. So actually winter is the season of growth, but growth that you can't see.
Which is brilliant, because it feels like it just displaces everything. Just it's like you have two, I don't know, wheels, and you just move them slightly so that it's like, oh, this is the time that looks beautiful, but it is kind of hard, and this is the time that feels like winter, and it feels hard and cold and nothing, but actually loads is going on, and I find that very hopeful. Yeah. And I love being. I find the more I'm connected to the seasons, the happier I am. Funnily enough, talking about Hades, there is this musical, Hadestown, by Anais Mitchell, and she I once saw her as an opening act to Josh Ritter, but she's actually done work with Mick Flannery, our local musician as well.
Yes.
And she wrote a beautiful musical by Hadestown, which is kind of set, the vibe is kind of plantation American South, kind of. and the music is that kind of really nice, bit bluesy, bit jazzy. But that musical is really cyclical. Like, and I love it because it really tells that super well known story of Orpheus and Eurydice. I never know how you say Eurydice in English, but anyway, something like that. But they tell it as kind of an annual thing, and then there's the relationship between Hades and, is it Persephone?
Yes.
So that mirrors then the falling in love and the journey of the younger couple and then the older couple, and they've really woven in this theme of the cyclical nature. So it's like Hades and Persephone kind of like she loves it when she's up above and she's in the world and in spring and she's drinking strawberry wine and she loves it, and then she has to come fucking down to him in the winter, and it's hard, but they still love each other, but he thinks he needs to get his security by giving her golden chains. And it's all that theme of femininity, masculinity, which we were just talking about. And then there's this lovely sense of will we try again? We'll try next fall. And they go around again. But then at the end of the story of Orpheus and Eurydice, it's like obviously very sad. He is tempted. I think everyone knows the story, right? But it's like she dies, and in this story she kind of chooses to sign a contract to be alive forever in the underworld, but then the underworld turns out to be some sort of fucking factory where they just have to be slaves for Hades, and then he is like this big man with a wonderfully big voice, and this is really lovely. I say everyone look it up on Spotify. It's beautiful, especially the first version of it. And then but then the story kind of ends when he turns around. And it's like, oh fuck, so he comes to rescue her from the underworld, and Hades kind of like, am I gonna stop this because people actually really like them? So it'd be as a dictator, which he kind of is. It's like, can I go against the will of the people this much, or will they overthrow me? He's like, okay, I'll give them a chance, but then if he turns around,
so that's it. Eurydice has to follow him out of hell, and everything will be good. He just has to not look back.
Yeah, so thank you for tying that. And then
because I've always found that really tough. It's like you've gone into hell to rescue her, and you at least want to hold her hand.
Yeah,
or
you
something.
Cannot check. You have to have complete faith.
Yeah,
it's like one of these things that you said before about stories being the place where we store things that we don't really understand. Like that story is so fucking rich. And the way they've interpreted is beautiful. But then what I love is, so it goes wrong. He turns around. He's tempted. And that's done with the music as well in a beautiful way that you're like, oh, of course he's fucking tempted. They're all in his ear. And it's like, and he turns around. So it's like, no, done. She stays in hell. That's the end of the story. But the way they've told it is that kind of Hermes is the storyteller in this thing. And he comes and he has a beautiful song at the end. It always really moves me where he kind of goes, he's saying, it's fucked. It's fucked. He looked around, it's fucked. But let me take a second now. Orpheus, what did he say? Orpheus was a young boy, but he had a gift to give. He could make you see how the world could be in spite of the way that it is. Can you see it? Can you feel it? And they kind of go into this beautiful song, really gentle. And he's saying, it's so fucked, it's done, it's fucked. But then in the song, it actually turns really hopeful. Like you hear like a little like trombone, and it kind of gets, and it's beautiful. And then it's like, on a sunny day, there's a railroad car and a lady stepping off a train. And everybody looked and everybody saw that spring had come again. And they go into this whole theme of they keep telling the story so that it might end differently someday.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. And it just ends on like, I won't spoil it, but like it's so rich. Listen to it and you'll love it. I've never seen the fucking musical. I've only ever listened to the music, but you can piece the story together. And it just ends on like, It's an old song. It's a tale of a love that never dies. It's a love song for anyone who tries. Boom. And I love that.
Yeah, that's gorgeous. And it's so interesting to pair it with the story of Hades and Persephone, who, Persephone was kidnapped. In the original myth, Persephone is kidnapped by Hades, and Demeter, her mother, goddess of the harvest and abundance, covers the earth in eternal winter until her daughter is returned.
Yeah.
And then they work out a deal. I think that there's different versions of the myth, but I think there's something like she ate 6 pomegranate seeds while she was in hell. So she has to stay in hell for 6 months of the year. So when she's up on Earth, it's spring and summer, and her mother Demeter is happy, and there's abundance. And then when she goes back down to the underworld, to Hades, it's autumn and winter, and her mother misses her. And so the Earth becomes, but that cycle keeps returning, and this thing where Persephone has to keep choosing between her mother and her husband, because I think the implication is that her and Hades grow a kind of love, for each other. I'm getting a little bit confused between the original Greek myth, and I realize we didn't contextualize this very well. Supergiant Games are a video game studio who have made a video game about Hades, which is absolutely fucking wonderful, and it pretty close to the original myths, but they've made a few changes as well, so I'm getting a little bit confused. But have you ever played Pyre, their game Pyre?
No, I don't think so. No.
It's really cool, and it's a sports game. Right, there's this idea that there's a beautiful city up in the sky where everyone's happy, and then down on the earth everything's a bit rough, and you get exiled from the city. And you can find your way back to the city by playing this game. I think the game's called Pyre, and it's like so the video game is a sports game. You have 3v3, and you have a ball. You have to get it into the end zones, but you can lose every single game, and you can still finish the game. You'll just get an ending where you lost all the time, and then you have all these different characters, and depending how they do, they can get back into the good city or they have to stay on Earth. And then at the end, all of your decisions come together, and a wonderful Darren Korb, the composer of all the Supergiant games, he sings a song which tells you the outcome of every character, and it's so moving. And it's about whether there's this repeated line is like, he has found his way home, or it's really, really gorgeous. But again, I love that idea, and I think Supergiant Games do that really interesting, where in Pyre you could lose every game, and that doesn't stop the game. Like, you lose every match and there's still an ending, and that idea that you don't die. You know, if you fail, it's not the end of the world. You can go again. I suppose that's it. Do you believe in second chances, or don't you? Because in the original Orpheus myth, there's no second chance.
No.
He was told to do one thing, he didn't do it, and he loses Eurydice. But in the Hades myth, it's literally a myth of second chances. Where Persephone goes back to Hades and back to Demeter and back to Hades and back to Demeter.
100%. And isn't it wonderful that these stories need to be retold, and they need to be recast, and they need to be updated, but by people who have some real connection to source, be that the source material or the source of the universe. But it's like, it's for instance why, and I think it's actually wonderful to talk about these beautiful examples, but for instance why Disney is failing at this moment, like Disney Plus and stuff, is because they have put really contemporary thoughts on ancient stories and go, that's how we should think now. We've thought about this for 2 seconds, and Snow White, it's bad that she gets rescued by a man, so it should be different. She should be a leader. And it's like, that's not what that story is about, and it doesn't work, and you see that it doesn't work. Whereas you can tell, like that Hadestown example I just gave. Like, they're all strong fucking characters, and but it still is true to the original story. Yeah,
and I think if you want a new story, write a new story, or remake another story where this is part of it. But to take you
can't gut a story. That's the thing. If you gut a story, then it won't work anymore. And it's hard to tell when that works and when that doesn't. I do think when people are really in tune, and like that work A.S. Mitchell did there, like, it's insane. The songs are are so good, and it's so dark and light and joyous and sad, and it's all the colors. It's like what you want from a Greek myth, I suppose, you know.
And I love that it's Orpheus that goes to find Eurydice, like Orpheus, who can spread so much joy to everyone, you know, that he can literally help you forget your circumstances. That's how good he is of a musician. And then he is beset by this tragedy, and he can't accept it, you know, and he has to actually go and do something about it, and he fails.
Yeah.
You know, it's...
Which is in a way perfect. Yeah, if you made that into a happy ending story in that way. But what I love about that story, I was just telling about that last song of that musical and stuff, is like, I always love it when there is an undertone of hope. Because when it's just, I must have said this before, but when it's just like, the world is dark, reality is dark. Oh, here you thought it might be hopeful, but that's so cliched.
Yeah.
We'll make it more dark. And like I've said before, there's dark stories that need telling. But I personally find, in a weird way, it more realistic when there is an undercurrent of hope. Well, I love that with the Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. You know, it's a brilliant film.
Amazing.
And I love that it's all about like relationship falling apart and your memories and how people treat each other and mistreat each other. And then at the very end, it's just like a question mark.
Yeah.
Just the last line, I think it's something like, she goes like, it won't work, and you'll get annoyed with me again, and I'll get annoyed with you, and he's just like, let's do it. I love that.
Yeah. You know, one thing that always annoyed me about Game of Thrones and George R.R. Martin, you know, he's like, you know, in Tolkien, everything was so good and evil, black and white. And he's like, you know, we just put Aragorn in charge and everything's going to be fine. And I want to know, what's Aragorn's tax policy? You know, how's this actually going to work? And he was like, I want the evil in these stories to be men, you know, because that's the real evil in the world. And I'm like, that's the obvious. Yeah, we know. we know that. Yeah. Like you've just gone back 360 degrees to like, that's what Tolkien was. By changing the world a little bit, he allowed him to highlight by putting a layer of dissociation on top of it and abstraction, allowed him to examine more things. Also, Aragorn getting back on the throne is like a little piece of the puzzle, but it does not fix the world. The whole thing about the Lord of the Rings is the world is in decline.
Yeah,
you know, it's the whole thing. They don't save the world. They just cast a little bit more light in it for the time that they have left.
Exactly.
You know, it's just...
And the main protagonist pays, in a way, the ultimate price. It just doesn't look as cliche, but he has to give up home.
Yes.
Like, it's not like, he lived happily ever after. Well, he does in the hereafter, like, but not in the... It was funny that in a way, it's not a coincidence that we should talk about Lord of the Rings because it's never far from our minds. But we had our really good friends, Stefan and Elisa, visiting us, and Stefan was saying that he had just reread The Lord of the Rings for the first time in 20 years. Fool. And he left it that long. And now he was reading the Storm of Swords, or one of the Game of Thrones. He was reading up on the Game of Thrones. And he was like, it's so interesting how it's so different, and Tolkien's really black and white, and this is really, everyone is grey. And I'm like, it's definitely true that everyone's grey, but I find, Tolkien's work far superior. And he was kind of taken aback. He was like, well, isn't it both? And I was like, no, it just feels like, to me, this is not going to make me any friends, but to me, like Game of Thrones, or what's the original name? The Song of Ice and Fire. It just feels like it's well-written fantasy, but it's like also like just really realistic, nihilistic, materialistic fantasy. And like the fact that he's not finished it and that the show has kind of made a shit ending, and it's like, I don't know if there's an underlying philosophy.
Yes,
whereas
exactly.
The Lord of the Rings, I read all those books, the ones that he did write, and he's obviously a very competent author, and I could never do a thing like that. But I don't believe, like, I would never go back to them.
Yeah.
I read them and I was like, what happens to this guy? What happens? But a bit like a soap opera in a way, you know, like, okay. And it's interesting. Like, there's definitely interesting characters and really evil characters. I especially liked Jaime Lannister's whole story arc in the books. where you go, this guy is dirt, and then actually it's like he gets more softer and softer and softer, and you go like, oh, interesting, okay, I do feel some compassion for him. I do think that's a big strength of those stories, but I don't feel there's an overarching
people are kind of shitty.
Philosophy. People. The philosophy is people are pretty shit, but also sometimes good, and they're all grey, always.
Yeah.
And then it's like, I think Tolkien kind of asks us to aspire to something.
Yeah.
So you can go, oh, that's a bit sentimental, or that's a bit black and white. I think that's only a very cursory reading if you're doing that. I can go back to that story multiple times a year and get something new from it each time.
Yeah. And I think, if you talk about Aragorn taking the throne in The Lord of the Rings, like Tolkien has said many, many times that it's not an allegory for Hitler and the World Wars and stuff, but he did write them during 2 World Wars. And one thing that I don't know whether consciously or not, the films really seem to highlight, at least to me, is people in positions of power not being up to the task. Like how many people, King Theoden and, in Gondor, the Steward of Gondor, they're like, no, we're not going to do anything. We're going to just protect ourselves. There's a great evil coming, but we're just going to think about our people. And I think that's why Aragorn was a good character, is because he stepped into the role of kingship and all its burdens, because he was like, the role of a leader would be in times of crisis to motivate, lead from the front, and maybe bring people together to fight a bigger threat. And I think that's it. Not that he was a God-given right to be a king, or the kings will solve everything, but that all the other leaders were failing. And some of them were redeemed. Theoden comes back round and so on. But
in a way, the story does make it out like he is really the one king that we're meant to have, but also he has proven himself at all the levels.
Yeah.
So he can be a skilled hunter in the wild. He can be a good friend. He can be a good servant. He can be a good healer. Maybe we should have him as king.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of pushed on him, and he's actually been shying away from it. Whereas the people who seek it are always
Isildur.
And they're always the hard. Like, look at any of our politicians. They all want that trinket. Like, oh my God, I saw a huge poster of, what's the current Taoiseach? Is it Simon? Oh God, this is not going well. Sorry, cut this out, Anthony. But anyway, it's just like, another kind of bland, unethical person. Yeah. Well done. Oh Jesus, sorry. Why do I always do this when there's a microphone? Go back to the nice things. Go back to the nice things.
Well, you've been cursed with a degree in political science, Bart.
Yeah.
So
which has been worth every penny, because it made me stay as far away from fucking politics as possible. And I'm sure I'll get to rue that someday as well. There'll be something I really care about, and I'll get back into the arena, and I'll be corrupted.
Yeah.
And we'll see, or I won't.
But that's the interesting thing about politics for me, is that like when there's an election coming up, I'll do my research. I go on to, you've got these aggregate sites that tell you what each politician's policies are. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, I'm just going to try to look at these people as an empty vessel for delivering policy. Yeah. And I'm like, it's a very imperfect system. I'm still very glad we have it. I think proportional representation is far, 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 far superior to what they have in the UK or the US. Yeah. It has its issues like every democratic system, but it's oh my God, it's so much better than the alternatives. But you just have to wade into the grey, I think, when you're dealing with this stuff. And that doesn't mean you can, some people are like, okay, I'm not going to vote at all because there's no perfect candidates. I'm like, I get it. I mean, like, I'm definitely not going to be going around championing one political party or another. But I'm like, when the time comes, I think part of your job as an adult and a citizen is to wade into that grey and just look, here's our best choice. And then the other side of that is the politicians that work locally, and you can actually see their work, and then you can be like, okay, there is that local level to politics as well, which is also
Thank you for
very
actually
important.
saying that, because actually when I say the garbage people, I actually do mean the people at the very top, because I've met wonderful politicians working locally.
Yes.
So thank you for saving me from another like grand fucking
Well, I look, where it's the American presidential election at the moment. So I think when we're thinking about politics, we are thinking about the big politics. But local politics is so fucking important.
Yeah, and I quite like that here you do have that kind of, well, you can't really call it federal, but you do have a real localized, like people going into it all from a local area. And I really see the benefits of it, because you do have people then really championing that area. That also has its downfalls, you know, when, what do they call that? Was it like pork labeling or something? There's some kind of expression where people just always need to find, you know, a win for their, people can really easily be manipulated because local politicians just need a win for their locality.
Yes.
So at the national level, the leader can just go, all right, we'll give this to County Clare, and then you'll do what I want for this national thing. Like, that's the downside of it. But I do think there's very powerful people. Yeah, and I'm thinking of a few like who do really champion our interest, which is great. Yeah. No, I'm thinking of the top local level, and I 100% agree with you. Like, especially if you think about the American stuff, you just go, well, okay, well, I won't give anyone any advice, but I might go, oh, it's both horrible. If you think it is actually binary, I would go maybe try a third party. You're gonna have to start getting that in at some point, and that might change people's outlook on being able to vote for them.
Two-party systems just don't work.
Yeah, they don't work.
There's no possible
exactly.
way
but then if you look at the two parties, I would go for the one less war and maybe a bit more focused on healthy nutrition. But that's the only thing I'm saying. But then people, well, the thing I was thinking about is that what people do is that they try to put someone in the place of Aragorn.
Yeah.
They kind of go, no. For instance, at the moment, a lot of it is like, well, Donald Trump is a criminal and Kamala Harris she's a woman of color and that's great and this and that. And I'd just be like, well, first of all, they're both liars, clearly. With the one liar being very aligned to the system, so just going to be a puppet for the system. And the other one a bit more of a personal narcissist who's actually gonna
wonderful choices.
Wonderful choices. But who's actually gonna upset the system because he sometimes just won't fucking do it, and is a bit less keen on war, which I've really found interesting. Like, I always thought that man is so horrible, but then I'm like, yeah, but he's the only president who didn't start 100 wars. But thank God I'm not voting in that election, because it's just like choice of two evils, you know, and.
It's like, that's a real gray area.
Yeah.
You know, it's the thing about Donny T,
our friend,
is that what worries me about him, is that he's pure chaos. He's pure chaos. Yeah. He comes from nowhere. He's going nowhere. He can say anything. He can do anything. Yeah. Like, he's broken the system because he's just like, oh, I'm not playing it. He's playing soccer and he's like, no, I'm going to pick the ball up. And like, people, you can't do that. And it turns out you can, which is really frightening. And he lies and tells so many lies with such frequency that you can't actually combat them all. Yeah. And I think what that reveals is a problem in our systems and our thinking, because it's so funny that we have on the one side a very binary system, you know, where it's like red or blue, you know, and then you have somebody who's just a complete agent of chaos. Like, if it benefited Trump, he'd run for the Dems in the morning. Like, you know,
100%.
He's like
100%.
So I just find him fascinating that. Oh, politics is always such a weird place, man.
Yeah, I didn't even necessarily want to go there, but I like the archetypal. Also because we could unpack this like a million different ways. Yeah, and also even But I'm just thinking, like, even in terms of the, you know, that idea that if you go far enough to the left, you meet the right. You know, so Brexit was a good example of that, where the really far left and the really far right were both pro-Brexit, and then. But then you see this weird rebound effect where Labour in the UK only get into power when they have a right-wing leader. Yeah. And it's like Blair or Starmer, you know, and it's just, and I don't know how anyone could float on the seas of contemporary politics, like following all the ups and downs,
without just panicking, without just being like, there is nothing to hold on to. It's all pure chaos. And so what I've been trying to do is like really step back a little bit and maybe try to look at things in terms of bigger cycles and in terms of maybe mythological kind of stories, and look at these powerful characters and actually, and where I'm going with this is, I think we are really reaching a stage, and we kind of talked about this on the last episode, where you cannot have faith in big structures anymore to fix everything.
Thank you.
They're not going to disappear. We will always need them. Like, we need the EU. I'm pro EU. Like, I think we really need it to compete on a global stage. But the idea that it's going to come down from on high and solve all your problems, no, we need to solve our problems. Whoever you are, wherever you are, you need to be able to rely on the neighbors around you. You need to be able to chat to people in the street. You need to have human connection. You need to, like, that's real. Like, these big organizations are not actually real. They have this Tower of Babel-esque mythology to them. They're like, it's too big to fail. Too big to fail? Too big to fail? What the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah. That just means we need to prop it up rather than, like, the thing you said about the credit union.
Yeah.
Where it's like, it's small enough that it works.
Yeah.
And the too big to fail means it's actually falling to pieces, but we're going to prop it up.
Yeah.
I love what you said there, because I was just thinking, for the last while, we've been sometimes coming into politics, and the only thing I feel is a fucking minefield where I'm like, oh God, if I say this, people think I'm a Republican, and when I say this, people think I'm a Democrat. I'm fucking neither. I think it's all, like you say, it's not gonna save us. And one of the things you can really see from it is how much projection there is in it. Because I'll just go back, because I think you've done a wonderful thing here where you've led us out of it, because I'd like to go out of it, because it's not what interests. Like, we were just talking about myth and story, and it felt nice and big and uplifting, and now we're talking about politics, and it feels like you're on a choppy fucking sea that's not really, doing you any good. But you just nailed it. Why do we keep coming back to it? Well, it's in the ether.
Yes.
And it's crumbling to fucking bits. And the thing you can really tell is that they all do the same things. Like, I was just thinking about, when I was talking about Hadestown, there's a really cool song about why we build the wall. And this was written before Donald Trump came up with his border wall. Gas thing is, Kamala Harris is now in favor of the border wall, even though she lampooned him for it. That kind of thing just shows you. And then the Democrats go, we're in favor of, he is a threat to democracy. We need to save democracy. Okay, we're not going to have any primaries, and we're going to just displace the guy we said that you all voted for, and then we're going to put someone completely undemocratically in, and also no passports at the voting booths. Thanks, guys. And again, this is not me slamming the Democrats. I could do something on the other side as well. But it is like, they all lie through their fucking teeth, man. And it's just, but the nice thing is, that's not where it's at. And I love how you fight, because I was just thinking, why the fuck am I in this fucking minefield again? And I always bring us there as well. Why? But it's like an itch you need to scratch. But I think you are right. This is what it is. I had a wonderful call yesterday. I'll keep it very anonymous, because it is a wonderful call, and someone was talking about worrying about the environment, and that was a real deep despair. But it was a beautiful conversation. It wasn't nihilistic. It was just like dealing with that, and that sometimes the grief you can get with worrying about the environment actually leads to inaction. Oh, yes. And then there was another older person who said, I 100% feel what you're saying, and it's all true, and there is a lot of ecological change. But I have managed to figure out what my role is in this lifetime, and that's what I am going to do. And that is the only way in which I can make any positive change.
Absolutely.
And I love that. I was like, yes. It is actually the same as when I soppily told about that song last time of like, a world full of troubles, but how could I not love you? It's like, the only thing I can do is play the part that I'm meant to play. And Jesus, isn't it hard to find our part? But I know that me working, for instance, for an environmental NGO, that doesn't feel like my part. I'm not sure what my part is yet. Maybe my part is having weird communications with the Kerry fella, and
well, the first part of your part is figuring out what your part is and learning to live authentically. Because
exactly, and then another thing, we were just talking about fatherhood before the episode. It might be a wonderful topic to get to some other time, but what fatherhood also really did for me is like it ties you to the earth. So when people sometimes I will see in people who are now, again, this could rub people the wrong way, but I don't mean it like that. Because I think if you want to be a parent or not, that's 100% up to you. I think it's good if we're all playing a parental or mentoring role in our lives, but you could give birth to an institution, a collective. You could do. There's so many different ways in which that falls. So I'm not being like super.
It's nice for us to nurture something that's coming after us.
Exactly. Yeah. I do think I will stand for that. I do think that if your whole life is only about you're going to be very unhappy. Mm-hmm. But it can be in whichever way. But what I've noticed with when you have children, the kind of grand nihilism, you just can't do it anymore. You can't do like when people go, oh, the world's going to fucking hell in a handbasket. I don't know who that guy was. Anyway, and it's probably a different...
Though. Yeah. Sounds like he's holding a bottle of bourbon.
Yeah, and a shotgun in the other hand. Yeah. But like it's... you can't do it anymore because you're like, okay, well, maybe the world is difficult, but it's a sunny day out and I'm taking the kids for a walk because they need a bit of sunshine, and then I'm going to feed them. And it's like, it really brings you down to the moment, and it doesn't allow you. And also, it kind of reminds you, like, there was a funny thing they did in my secondary school when we were graduating. They had like, someone did a speech. I don't know if it was the principal or whatever it was, and they had they had translated from Latin a speech, but we didn't realize. So it was just like, as we all know, kids these days are fucking idiots, and the environment is going to shit, and there's a real problem with nationalism. And then it was like, yeah, this was 3,000 years ago, you know. And it's
I've got a book there, the Huainanza, and it's 2,000 years ago, 2,500 years ago. Same shit, lads. We all think, and also this is why go talk to old people, because they will set you straight as well.
Exactly.
Like the world has never been worse. In certain ways, yes, and in other ways, no. I mean, like it is very hard to make a buck in many parts of the world, but also we're usually not skipping meals. You know, like there's, you know, there's a lot there. I love that. But the environmental thing, like the world is degrading, the environment is fucked. It's a good symptom of the fact that we are, as a society, not living in a healthy way because the world is banjacks, the climate is fucked, all this stuff is happening. But in terms of solutions, the idea, I think, that we could use the mechanisms that got us into environmental degradation to get us out of environmental degradation. So large organizations, technological development, capitalism. I am very suspect that they will be the solutions. Whereas we probably don't know what the solutions are yet. If you took somebody 100 years ago, let's say maybe a little longer, 130 years ago, and we're just like, okay, you have 130 years to fuck the world up as much as you can. We need more hurricanes, less ice. We need to destroy 2/3 of the forests. We need like 40% of the animals gone, you know? They would have been like, that's not possible.
Yeah.
But it happened.
Yeah.
And I do believe there's a way back, because I think if there wasn't a way back, nature would have just killed us already. Like, I believe in the Gaia hypothesis, which is that there's also a slight arrogance, I will call it an arrogance to this, that the idea is that we've destroyed the earth and we need to save it. Certainly, we are part of... I don't believe we're separate from nature, first of all. We are part of nature. I do believe we have an obligation towards guardianship, but not because we will destroy nature otherwise. Just because it's the right thing to do. Like you said, we should nurture. Ideally, as organisms, we should give at least as much as we take, and ideally a little bit more. And if nature doesn't want us, she will get rid of us. She has an intelligence. You know, like the earth will be fine. But I do think that there are people being born now, ideas being born now, experiences and perspectives starting to germinate that absolutely, whether they will or not, they can lead to a healing. And we don't know what they are yet. No. The same way somebody in 1880 wouldn't have known the technologies that can lead to the degradation. The systems that could lead to healing, literally they don't exist yet. Yeah. But you have to have a bit of faith that they might. And I think this is what really scares me, is that when people decide not to have children, and this is a very personal choice, my God, nobody should ever talk to anyone one way or the other about this. But when the decision not to is based on the fact that the world is terrible, I'm like, every generation could have probably said that, and that hopelessness worries me, because the people that are usually thinking that are quite sensitive people, whereas the people that are having like Elon Musk cannot impregnate women fast enough.
He's our Genghis Khan.
He is. We're like 10 years away from him putting his brain into a fucking army of robots. Like these bullheaded assholes that are not thinking, that are not sensitive or empathetic. They're the ones that are spreading their influence and their genes. Like they're
I do think, on the other hand, though, what I do like about him, because I see all that you're saying, but what I do like about him is that at least he's upsetting the status quo a bit, and not always in a good way, but certain things have definitely been. I like Neil Brennan was just like, Elon Musk, he's created Tesla, and but he's a bully and probably a bad dad. It's like, so was mine, but he did nothing to combat climate change. It's like, yeah, fair enough. But I love what I love a lot of the stuff that you're saying there. And I think what really hit me about like that idea of the earth is like that it's actually our environment that we have to look after. It's not necessarily the entire earth. It's like we need to live. It's nicer to live in a place where there isn't rubbish in the streets and where the ground is allowed to be healthy and not just slash and burn agriculture and all that stuff. And the solutions, they are slightly invisible to us. I do think you said like, well, it won't be the same systems, and 100% agreed there, but parts of them will. And like technological change can do wonders sometimes. Like if I saw an image once of like how much shit there was coming out of car exhaust until they put in
catalytic converters.
Yeah, exactly. And then you see that the ice is just white again, from after that time.
The hole in the ozone layer is basically fixed.
Yeah, and people kind of forget, like we fix a problem, we go, what's the next problem?
Yeah.
And so we can actually do brilliant things. And what was this thing now that someone, that I heard someone say, someone was making, there was an atheist commercial, I don't know when, I think 10 or 20 years ago, that was like, God probably doesn't exist, go enjoy your life. And there was a rabbi who went, probably is doing a lot of work in that sentence, which I thought was very good. And he was like, the probability of us living on a rock that is exactly as far away from the sun as it needs be, and the fact that we have hundreds of nukes and we still haven't blown up the place, like probability, it's a fine thing.
That's the other thing. Like in the 80s, people thought we'd be literally wiped out by nuclear weapons.
Jesus, I'm still fucking worried about it. Like I'm just touching wood because fixed. I'm so OCD about it.
But there were so many more.
But probability is such a, and like even in small things, like yesterday when I was driving my friends to Limerick for them to take the bus to the airport. It was just like grey and lashing. I was like, oh, okay, it's going to be one of them days. Well, we had a lot of nice days. And I was in Limerick and it was gorgeous. Mm-hmm. And I know that sounds really silly compared to but it's like that morning I could not imagine seeing blue skies that day.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Sometimes you just have that thing of like, we're in this, so this is it now forever. Mm-hmm. Things can turn on a dime and the change can be brilliantly great. But I think it has to do with kind of, I'm still, you said so much that I had a lot to unpack there. I think it's like something about genuine channeling or something. Like that Hadestown musical, I think that is genuine channeling by a brilliant artist. So it works. It's successful. Everyone likes it, even if people don't get it. And I probably don't get half of it. But it's like a genuine thing. Even like the thing that they have a song about why do we build the wall? If that was purely a fuck Donald Trump song, that wouldn't have been half as interesting. But it's actually really interesting because the people are singing why they build the wall, not like someone is building a wall. He is the bad guy. Like, he is the bad guy in a way in that story, and he's a dark energy. But they're like, why do we build the wall? We build the wall to keep us free because the enemy is poverty, and the wall keeps out the enemy. So we build the wall to keep us free. That's why we build the wall. And I'm like, that's more interesting. They're probably still wrong to build that wall.
Yeah.
But it's a more interesting story because you can understand the fear of poverty. You know, so like it's like I love anything that is more layered than that. And I think with our environmental stuff, it'll be the same. Like if you see someone like Harry with his beautiful farm, or so many people around here who make something wonderful of the land that they have been endowed with for the next 60 years or so.
Yeah.
It's gorgeous. And it's like, I was talking to someone from what's that small town outside Cork? Glenmire. And it always makes me laugh because the two Johnnies had like a skit where they have this D4 dad, and you go, Glenmire, is that in fucking Mordor? So that's always what Glenmire reminds me of. Glenmire, is that fucking Mordor?
Can I jump in?
Yeah, I'm going a bit long.
No, but one of I once heard a person with a relatively posh accent, for D4 accent again. They were like, so I heard you've moved to Ennistimon.
Listen, Anthony, they do serve lattes here, and they do call margarita pizzas Margie. So
they do. Margie pies.
Oh, that's fucking
Ennistimon.
But they were talking about that around. How are you, Katie? Katie's not making noise. Anthony started dropping things once.
My chair is actually. I waved to Katie and a bit of my chair fell off.
I had to wave because look at how many crisps I brought.
Oh, and we can't. She's brought 2 big packets of Kyo's crisps, which are the best crisps.
Oh, Kyo's, get on to us, please.
And they're not exactly the most podcast friendly snack. So.
And she's brought in an array of colour as well, which I love. And super strong Katrien gloves. Household and kitchen. We're really getting sponsorships out of this one.
They're freezing the crisps.
Big film. Yeah. Brilliant. but this lady was talking about that around Cork. There's now a lot more like big agriculture. And they were like, okay, big fields, big farm, get it all industrialized, make more money that way. And then, but she was doing a master. She's doing a master's in architecture.
Sorry,
go on.
Katie, we are talking a little bit about environmentalism and the Gaia hypothesis and stuff. Do you have anything you'd like to?
She's like, how can you fucking spring this on me?
You're invited.
She said already.
Come sit down and.
Yeah, I'm just gonna finish this. No, but do sit down. The thing in your own house. Oh God. But the thing that she was doing a master's in architecture, and she's actually looking at Harry's farm to kind of write down a lot of the stuff around the area and kind of, what's the word for this, to keep it for posterity, because a lot of the stories and the names of places and stuff are all so like oral tradition, you know. And but she was saying, like, they can't do in Clare, you can't really make big industrial farms because the landscape just doesn't allow for it, and people don't come here because they're making money. And in a way, that is why so many beautiful gardens and bits of land are growing. Okay, Katie is giving me a weird look.
I love this. I think it's so sweet because it also suggests that the landscape attracts a certain value system, because
100%.
you have to be sensitive to it, because the topsoil, especially around the Burren, is so fragile, you 100%. Know, so thin. And obviously the overgrazing created this beautiful exposed coarse landscape, but that's also something, it's that's intentionally being kept that way now, you know. I love that. It's this. Have you read? Did you bring up that? Have you seen in Harry's Cottage? There's this book. It's about how round towers made of mica, which is a form of rock. I think it's an igneous rock, so it's like an original rock. That these round towers create basically like giant electromagnetic pulse points in the land that support the growth of plants surrounding them. And we were fascinated by this book. We picked it up, and he was like, this is a really important book, and it's now really expensive to buy, because we were like, we'd love to buy this book, and it was like €150 on Amazon, because it's obviously short supply and high demand. But it's amazing to think about how, the land and what we build there, when you start to see the level of relationality, we're like, oh, well, what does it matter if I throw this crisp packet on the ground? Well, actually it does. And to take responsibility for that relationality is really courageous, and also to not just jump to like a guilt cycle. Takes attention, because that's not, if who I am to Anthony in a marriage is being like, I'm just constantly guilty and feeling ashamed of myself, are we gonna have great crack? I don't think so. And honestly, it's like that thing. One thing I've really learned the last year is like singing for the land, because one thing we can, like, don't we love hearing the birds sing? Yeah. Likewise, they like hearing us sing, just as we find a flower beautiful when we feel good in ourselves and we've chosen our outfit and done our hair. And again, astrologically, this is important to different people in varying levels. But then we're also participating in this appreciation and reflection of beauty within nature too. When you think about the Gaia principle in its like absolution, it is actually mind-boggling. It can it can be something really easy to go, oh yeah, I think that's right. But then to be like, everything's intentional, everything has a function. We can interact with it. It's like,
yeah, and that's why also we have to keep doing our small tasks, because it is too big. I love what you're speaking to, because what I've been kind of finding as we carry on with this season of the podcast is that there are like bigger themes emerging, and sometimes it's a bit hard to capture it in one thing of a podcast, because what you're speaking to now, it puts me in mind of so many things of like, I've been thinking so much about like femininity, masculinity, which obviously we had you on the podcast to talk about that as well. And I'm doing a big course on integrated masculinity and femininity. But it's like, it's so much to do with like having things in their proper place. Like you say, like I have to be a bit of crack in this relationship. And it's the same with the earth. It's like if you go, oh my God, everything is fucked. It's like, well, you're not going to do anything. And that's why I was saying to Anthony just now that I was on a call yesterday, and someone was saying, like an older person, I'll keep it as anonymous as possible, was saying like, no, I know there's a lot of environmental trouble, but I know what my role is on this earth, and I'm going to do that. That's the only thing I can do. And that's in a way so reassuring, where you're like, no, this task, don't all be, and also in the meantime, like try and be sustainable and stuff like that. But it's like everything in its proper place, because the excesses on either side of anything are so hard. Like, and we were talking about, especially about the environment, like what's happening now at a top level is like authoritarianism about the environment. Like, I'm really worried about the day we'll have a digital currency and they'll go, yeah, Anthony, that bar of chocolate you bought has a CO2 score of -5%. You're not buying that bar of chocolate. We're going to limit where your car goes. Like it can go that far. There is places in the world where it is going that far. So, but that's not the right place. The right place is locally.
But then we get also into a tricky place, because there's been times where I have been thinking a little radically and gone, what would be really good for the environment is if we start to divest from tourism. Right? Because flying, hugely expensive on fuel, fossil fuels. the effect on local populations where they have less accommodation, where they have more traffic on the roads, where we're creating services for people who come and go really quickly. But then pilgrimage and movement, migrations of people is part of like human life. It's been part of our story. Nature. So it's like sometimes you can't always just look at it from the sheer like what's good for the environment, even though I still play with that idea because I think it's like the last thing anyone wants to hear is like, no, you can't go to Lisbon for the weekend because that's bad for the environment.
But 100%, but this is exactly the point I'm trying to make, is that it always has to have things in its right place. Because if you go completely that way, it's shit. But if you go completely that way, it's shit as well.
Catch flights, not feelings.
Yeah. But also
that was Anthony's strategy for many years.
God, I miss it.
Yeah,
but like
he's got his only feelings.
But it's so hard and it's so difficult. Like for instance, like I could say, if someone went, we're solving the problem, no one's ever flying again. I'd be like, I live in the best country that I love in the world. Fine.
Oh, you would be chuffed.
I'd be delighted.
Yvonne would be like,
yeah, exactly.
And you would be like, I've finally gotten the world of my dreams.
Exactly. But then again, like, if it weren't for the people all making their pilgrimage to Clare, like, it'd be much harder for us to play music and make some money off that and all that. This is such a funny look, the 2E in front of the microphone. It looks very harmonious.
Take it.
I'll have to take the snap. Okay. Yeah.
And I'm not wearing my wedding
ring. Don't do a normal face. He has this thing where he does a weird face when he just looks as a person. Yes, as a human.
Look as a
Can't
person.
do it.
Yeah.
I'll try it. And I had a fella I knew once, and I was going over to China, and it should be worth pointing out that this fellow is a real Richard Dawkins type skeptic, like an irritating skeptic, not the kind of beneficial skeptic, which I actually relish. But I was like, I'm heading back to China, and he's like, you really need to watch your carbon footprint. And I was like, oh, that's a good point. I'll hitchhike. What the fuck are you talking about? It's China. How else do you want me to fucking get there? And I'm not going there for a holiday. I'm going there. I have a degree in Chinese. Learning Chinese medicine. I want to go to China and bring Chinese medicine back to the West. And therefore, I need to learn it to the highest level I can learn it in the place where it's practiced the best. So my options are to lower my standards or lower the quality of the medical training I'm getting, or to take a flight that's going to be going anyway. And I think that's where things like carbon footprints should be applied to companies, to corporations, to institutions, to governments. They should not be applied to individuals.
And this comes back to what we were talking about on the authority thing.
Yeah.
The intention is so disingenuous. And like, I don't know what the solution is, but I know that people who are structurally lying to you are not giving the solution. Like when Bill Gates flies all over the world in his G4 airplane on his own and then goes, you poor guy, don't go on a holiday. You know, that kind of thing. Or when the Irish government fucking dumps shit in our rivers, but then goes, no, Bart, your septic tank needs to be completely up to code and you need to spend 50 grand on that.
There's a paradox here. Sorry to cut
go on.
but I think it's really interesting because I do think the solutions lie in people mobilizing as individuals and small groups and living authentically. But also, that can be twisted in a cynical way where it's like, huge companies and huge corporations are going to fuck up the earth, and we're going to counteract that by asking individuals to sacrifice.
Yeah.
And they're going to do that through guilt and pressure and manipulation. You need to watch your carbon footprint. You're working a long week, but you're not allowed to go to this place for a wee holiday because that's going to raise your carbon footprint. Now, in that example, if you're exhausted and all you live for is your holiday in Lisbon, and then you're like, oh, no, I feel guilty for going to Lisbon. Perhaps the solution is work a job that doesn't make you feel as terrible. Yeah. And then you're like, well, I need to work for this corporation because I need to get a mortgage. And then you're like, okay, so I have to work for this corporation that's polluting the earth in order to afford a place to live. Working for this corporation makes me feel guilty because the earth is getting destroyed. So I need to then sacrifice more as an individual to try to counteract the damage that's being done to the earth by large institutions. You're getting fucked both ways. And when you think about it like that, and I'm not saying this is an easy thing, and I am not judging anyone that works for a corporation. If you have kids and you have a mortgage, you need to do what you have to do. But just maybe recognizing it and recognizing the pressures they're acting on us, and also get rid of guilt. Get rid of guilt. If you are going to contribute to the world, if you're going to contribute to environmentalism, do so joyfully. And in terms of even just being pragmatic, you will be able to contribute for longer and more effectively if you can contribute with joy than if you contribute with guilt or anger.
Like I think how Home Tree operate.
Home Tree are brilliant.
They're just so pragmatic, and when they bring people on for their open volunteer days, I think they're the first and the third Saturday of every month. They welcome, I think, up to 30-40 people to work on the land at whatever pace you want. They're not expecting you to move mountains, but ultimately the volunteers do, because everybody feels great about actually being in a group of people who are bonded by a shared common interest, which is to actually put hands to earth and do something small but significant in some way. It gives people an outlet, like a physical outlet, rather than like the screen,
Yeah.
You're really directional, you're in the earth, you're looking up. I
love that.
Yeah, and it's just it's great. So I always say I think people can't get enough of Home Tree.
Yeah. And they can't. Sorry, you go. Yeah.
The other thing I've seen, what you were talking about, I've hijacked the podcast now, but
I love it.
With women eating meat, that's actually something I see a lot of. Like, I will consolidate my environmentalism into being vegetarian or vegan. And especially we're women and men, women maybe a little bit more, have been subjected to so much messaging about what kind of body type is ideal. And I don't think that there are many women who can say that they don't have some aspect varying from really significant to just low-lying of an eating disorder. And then you enter your 20s and you're like, oh, I'm not going to eat meat, very compassionately. And I don't always know, but I do know that if I am bleeding really regularly and I am constantly renewing flesh within me, and I want to keep the option of having children on the table, that eating meat is an important part of that. And that humans also evolved eating meat, cooking meat, and that to go against that is some sort of, I think, self-sacrifice in the name of environmentalism that could have consequences that you can't quite predict. I think later in life, I think 50s, 60s, 70s, you could move more healthily towards a vegetarian vegan diet.
It's often what's done in China.
Yeah, but I think, in your high physicality years, and it's true, it roots you to the earth as well.
Just with everything that we're talking about, it's always for me having a nuanced approach. Like, you guys are not like, yeah, let's fucking only eat red meat or whatever, but it's just like, the thing that I just hate is when people are like, oh, this is the solution, done. It's like, no, it isn't. Like, I was actually talking to someone recently at a wedding who went completely all out vegan, but had the wisdom to trust her body. And she just went, I got horribly sick. I could not. Maybe there are people who can, but I think if you're going to turn to veganism, you're at our age, or, well, Katie, you're a bit younger, but anyway. But it's like...
I'm 15.
The wisdom of... Thanks, Katie. We're getting into that cancelable territory.
We still haven't consummated the relationship, so it's fine.
We're waiting
until my 16th birthday.
Oh my God. What's really nice about this is that for
Happy
once...
birthday, sweet 16.
God, you're making my flesh crawl. But I love is that usually I'm the person saying the cancelable stuff. So thanks, Katie. We're just going to leave that exactly where it is.
But ultimately, Anthony is the one to cancel.
I feel like there's nothing I can say that will make it worse.
No. The tomato color of your hue is or hue of your face is wonderful.
Get your face onto the camera.
No, I'm fine back here.
No, but it is that like, and it's with like guilt isn't serving anyone, and it's all that, like, I'm not making an adequate point, but I love it whenever I talk to people who are considering the world as it is, and it's like, we're trying to aim for this, but this is the reality of the world.
The other thing about vegetarianism and veganism, so my approach, again, I try to be pragmatic. If people are like, I want to eat less meat, I'm like, eat more veg. Yeah. Very simply, right? So one thing I'll often, if my patients don't have a very good diet, I will say, go vegetarian 1 day a week. That's not because it's inherently better or 1 day a week will massively improve your health. If you go vegetarian 1 day a week, you'll fucking learn how to cook vegetarian food. Because we don't really have a history of vegetarian food in Ireland, so we don't know how to cook it very well, so it doesn't taste great. Okay, so go vegetarian 1 day a week, learn some vegetarian food.
Vegetarian lasagna.
Yep, just mac and cheese. And eat more veg. But you can eat less meat and eat more veg. You don't have to eat no meat and only veg.
Yeah.
And there is a role, and I think, Chinese medicine 100% agrees with you, Katie, that meat, red meat, chicken, and is very, very important for young women. And I know there's debate on this issue and stuff, but I also know that I've treated young women that are vegan and would be very openly vegan. And I've had long conversations with them about it. I've explained that veganism is a valid choice, but we live in Ireland. What do we have around us? We have fish, beef, dairy, and root vegetables. Like, the vegan diets evolved in different countries. So straight away, that makes the environmentalism argument for veganism very complicated if you're importing everything. So I'm like, look what's around us. Look at our interaction with the land, which is, meat-based. We are farmers. We are farmers for 1,000 generations. And I'm like, you don't have to start eating meat every day, but listen to your body, as your friend does. And I remember one lady, very young, slim, small, petite woman came into me, and she was like, last night I had a 14-ounce blue steak. Now, I couldn't digest that part. I don't know about you, but like I would be like a boa constrictor just after eating an antelope, right? And I'm like, how did you feel after it? She's like, fantastic. She's like, digested it perfectly, slept like a baby. I don't think she needs to be going out eating that every day, every week, maybe not even every month. But when the body calls for it, you can still be 99.9% vegetarian or vegan and do an awful lot of good. As soon as you make it extremism, as soon as you start putting people into camps, you're a meat eater. Yeah. You're a vegetarian. I'm vegan. It becomes tribal. It becomes a way to shut down argument. It becomes, are you with me or against me? And I think we are talking about the gray areas. We are talking about pragmatism. And we're also talking about allowing people their own path. Some people do really well, vegetarian and vegan. Some people really struggle. I've tried to go vegetarian a few times. I've managed to do it once when I was in the south of China, and all my food was being grown within a mile or two of where I was eating. All
your food was mostly being cooked for you because you would eat out.
That's right.
90% of the time.
Any other time I've gone vegetarian, I get really weak and my mood goes low. Ooh. And so there's a quote, and I'm going to stop talking after this, but there's a quote from the Bhagavad Gita. Arjuna, who is a soldier. Yeah. Arjuna must respect the pacifist, and the pacifist must respect Arjuna. Yeah. Both of them are moving towards the same goal if they are truly committed to what they are doing. And so there is this point, like, we all need to do our bit, but it will be our bit. You know, the way you live authentically, and Katie and I live authentically, I do believe if you live authentically, you will find a way to benefit the world, but it won't be the same way. Me and you are not on the same, we agree on many things, but not on everything. And it doesn't mean that one of us is right and one of us is wrong. It just means we're different people with different paths forward. And that's great. And sometimes they'll knock against each other. And that's great too.
And I don't know, I still don't know what the topic of this podcast is, but maybe the thing that I'm taking from it that I always love is just a bit of nuance. And not like, oh, well, actually, have you read this study? It says, but more like you say, it's your path, it's my path. Let's see, but let's have enough compassion for other viewpoints to actually see, like, we started talking about politics. Like, I could never in a million years would have thought, like 7 years ago, that I would be seeing some benefits to the Republican Party's candidate. But I've heard so many people say so many, I'm like, I understand some of that. And I understand the other side. Like, but that's what I love, when you can meet people, not just dogmatic, animus-possessed kind of creations that they are. I think I'm losing Katie, which means it's not a very good point.
I got...
Oh, Blarney, you got Blarney.
I got distracted by the cutest moose in the whole world.
Blarney was having a dream and he was twitching.
So hard that he woke himself up.
It's nice that Blarney brings us back down to earth. Like, he was so excited when we were just the lads, when the lads came in, but then when he sees Katie come in, it's a whole nother level, you know.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
I'm going to go shower. Thank you for having me on.
Thanks for being on, Katie. You were wonderful, as always.
I appreciate it. And I'm just going to be shaking.
Thanks so much. But I love that point, man. I love that and it's always what excites me is when there is a bit of rub. You know, it's that story I think we talked about before. Is like someone looking for where's the yogi master in the village? Oh, he's the butcher.
Yes.
Because he can be the most kind in killing the animals that need to be sacrificed for the village to eat meat. And I just love things like that, where it's like, it's hard. The world is hard. Yeah. You can't just go, oh, I'm left, I'm right, I'm blue, I'm red, I'm vegan, I'm this, I'm that.
There was another practitioner. I won't give any details, but there wasn't a Bart's searching desperately for coffee.
Yeah, no, go on.
I'll make it.
No. Yeah.
But there was another practitioner, and they were kind of a naturopathic practitioner. They would look at blood tests and they would give people dietary advice. And I had to stop referring people to them because what would happen would be I would have, let's say, a single mum with 3 kids, one of them with special needs coming to see me. And I referred to this other naturopathic practitioner, and they gave so much incredibly specific and dogmatic dietary advice that was so individualized for each of the 3 kids and the mother, and you couldn't drink tap water, and you couldn't eat this, and you couldn't eat that, and you needed to buy this, and you needed to do that, and it just overwhelmed the mother with guilt, because she was like, I'm trying to take care of my kids and I'm doing everything wrong. You know, and I'm like, no, you're working, you're doing your best. And I didn't think it was, to be honest, right to put that pressure. Now, this is a very grey area, and other people will look at me, and like you're one that was given the advice, I'm sure, was just like, I'm just reading the tests and telling them what's needed. But it started a guilt spiral, and I just have no fucking time for it. And again, I have no time for it because I don't think it's effective, because I don't think guilt and shame and fear will ever motivate you long term. They're like stress responses. Yeah. Ideally, they're a sprint. They exist for a reason. Guilt and fear and shame, we should acknowledge them and we should act on them, but we can't live there. We cannot live there. And you have to acknowledge your position. And that person down the road that's getting up at 5:30 a.m. and doing their yoga and cooking all organic food for their kids, and wonderful, fair play to that person. But you're not them, you know.
100%. I was once speaking to a Dutch yoga teacher, and he was explaining to me about like the frequencies of different emotions. And his whole thing was like that shame and guilt. I don't know if there was another one, but he was like, it's all the way down the pyramid, man. And he was like, anger is a step up, because anger is a motive force. And I don't know what's at the top of the pyramid. Is it love? Maybe, probably. But like the frequencies are much, much higher. And it's like, there is no point you living in that guilt. Now, there's a point in you taking action where action needs to be taken. But like, I've even noticed it with behaviors I'm trying to change, is that if I go, you cannot do that anymore, Bart, it's never going to change.
Yeah.
But when I go, listen, man, say if I want a cookie, to keep it easy, like I want a cookie, I'm really craving that cookie. If I go, you cannot have any cookies, then I will not have a cookie today, and tomorrow I will eat all the cookies.
Yeah.
You know, whereas actually if I go, all right, have a cookie, but maybe have a look at how this need could also be maybe, you know, well, look at the need mainly, and don't punish yourself, but kind of go, and then I'm like, oh, actually, I'm feeling a bit sad, and I'm just trying to get away from that. Maybe be with the sadness for a bit, and then we can still have the cookie.
Yeah.
It changes so much more rapidly. It really changes so much more rapidly. And yeah, that guilting that's been done with the environment, with politics, with everything, I'm done with it. And I think it was one of the recent episodes, which are all a bit murky, and like it's interesting that I'm kept being drawn to that political thing, and then not really saying anything proper about it, but mainly just putting up some flags that people can get annoyed by. It's nearly as if that is the whole purpose, you know. But actually, I think in one of the episodes I said something like, if you guys don't like it, the only thing I can say is I love you. And that sounds a bit trite, but I actually mean that quite deeply. Is like, I say a lot of stupid shit. And the only thing I want is to be connected with you, with Katie, with the audience, with humanity, with Source. Please tell me how I'm wrong, but please do it to my face and listen to me. Like, I think that is honestly the way forward. It's going to be human connection rather than just ideas battling it out online with the bots.
Yeah, 100%. And respect the pacifist and respect the soldier. You know, if people are really trying their best to make things better, and even if you disagree with their methods, but you think they're coming from an authentic place, you know, there's something there. Like, your motivation is the same, even if the way you're doing it is completely different. Yeah, and there's somewhere there. And now, if somebody's motivation is inauthentic, then even if they're doing the quote unquote right thing, I might still have a bit of an issue with that. But
you can really feel that, can't you? When people tell you that they're being moral, which is always tricky anyway. If people are really sure of that their way is the right way, it always makes me think of. I think we've talked about this before, but that thing of like when you say you've conquered something, the world will hurl something at you. You think you've conquered it? Well, try this one on for size.
Yeah,
and that's why we all do have to be a bit modest. I always thought, like, why is it pride comes before a fall? I mean, we can all kind of see it in a simple story, kind of like, oh, if you're super prideful, people will be annoyed at you or something. But there's even in that, even if you're like, well, I'm Anthony and I am the greatest jiu-jitsu guy ever, then the next day the mountain will show up. Or maybe some featherweight guy that weighs as much as your arm will kick your arse.
Demetrius Johnson, yes. Yeah. But it's Orpheus, isn't it? You know, Orpheus went down to hell. He faced Hades. He grabbed Eurydice. He brought her out of hell. And at the last moment, he looked back, and it all fell apart.
He could have walked away with everything.
Yeah, but that would have been a very different story, and that wouldn't have been as meaningful.
100%. Thanks for tying it back in, brother. You always do. Do you think we found a topic?
I think maybe environment.
Yeah, might be. Or systems, I was thinking. But, you know, pick your own adventure, guys.
I'm editing, so I'm in charge.
I
will impose my authority upon you, and there is nothing you can do about it.
There's one bit that you will definitely want to cut anyway. This has been Weshtern Philosophy. Follow us on the socials at Weshtern Philosophy Pod. If you want to support the podcast, you can join our Patreon to help the show grow, or make a one-off donation via the Ko-fi link in the episode description. We'll be back next week with more chats and another topic. Slán.